School board meeting to order. If everyone could join me and stand, and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll give Toby a second to get settled in, and then we'll do the roll call.
Thank you. Peter Turk.
Here.
Barry Schmaley.
Here.
Marlo Brown.
Here.
Taylor Washaw.
Here.
Kevin Bird.
Here.
Roseanne Hahn. Here. Susan Kessler. Here. Thank you.
Next is approval of the minutes. I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes of two board meetings in the last month.
I move we approve the minutes of the last meeting. Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. All right, the minutes from both meetings are approved. Next, we have citizen comments. And we received over the last month, 7 comments to our board comments. And tonight we have also 7 people who have signed up to speak. So when I call your name, there's a microphone up front. Please come up. Ryan Miller, you were first. Ryan, before you start, maybe I'll just remind you, I believe most people know the rules, but the one rule I just want to emphasize is the 3-minute time limit. And Barry Schmaley here, my colleague, will raise his hand when you're at 15 seconds to go, and then you'll hear an alarm when it goes off. We just want to make sure we adhere to that. And whenever you're ready, Ryan, and thanks for adjusting.
Yeah. All right. Ryan Mueller. Good evening, board. I want to address the lack of transparency in the classrooms and curriculum of the Burlington Area School District. It was recently brought to my attention that a teacher of an 11th grade English class was reading a book titled Bang aloud to the students while they followed along in their own copy. The class was instructed to not bring the book home until the final assignment was to be done. Now, why was that? What is being hidden here? One can only stand to reason that this book is controversial and would have sparked questions from parents directed at the teacher as to why this book was being read in class. If there's nothing to hide, people don't keep things a secret. They are open and honest and forthright with information. Students aren't told they cannot take learning materials home. So I ask again, what is being hidden here? What agenda was being pushed that needed to be fed to students before parents found out the actual contents of the book? If there isn't an agenda, then there would be no reason to instruct students not to take home the book. Now, having read a few chapters of the book myself, I would indeed categorize this as a book parents would have a right to ask questions about. It models and glorifies abuse and violence. The book opens with the murder of the main character's 7-year-old brother. The father in the book is emotionally abusive towards his wife and son. What literary purpose does this book serve in terms of preparing students to read and comprehend at a high level? In my view, none. It only serves to push an agenda. I'm calling on this board to implement a curriculum transparency policy. Parents should not have to request the materials their children are being presented with in class, nor should parents get the runaround when they ask for them for their own review. Parents should not be finding out from their children that they were told not to bring home a particular book. Now, we parents fund the purchase of these materials through our taxes. We have the right to view what our money purchased, if we so choose to do so without needing a special request. The communication of the learning plan can be modeled after a college syllabus. It can be constructed at a high level and must include these following things: topics that are covered weekly, the materials to be used in class, and any links to web-based material the students will be using. The syllabus needs to be posted to the district website. Transparency isn't providing information when it's asked for. It's proactively supplying it before being questioned. I'll close this with this. Would you just blindly sign a contract to build a house with a contractor without sampling any of their work? Or would you first tour their model and inspect the quality and workmanship and the materials used? It's the same principle here. We parents are investing in the building materials and craftsmanship of our students' education. We have the right to inspect the materials and workmanship without impediment and those things that are being used to build their house of knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Adrian Melby.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I have several items on the agenda tonight that raise questions for me, but I'm hoping that they'll be addressed during the meeting. I just want to focus on two things and then reiterate the email that I sent earlier this week. At the bottom of policy 5330, it says that the use of essential oils are prohibited. That seems a little arbitrary and out of place to me. Perfume and body spray has all kinds of artificial fragrances, and yet that's allowed. So I'm just wondering what the reasoning behind the prohibition of essential oils is. Also on the agenda under board operations, Neola recommended revisions to bylaws and policies, the first reading. And I know you cannot respond during the meeting, but I would like to see the old or current wording of the Neola policies and the updated or recommended wording for all of the Neola revisions to bylaws and policies, as well as to technical updates. So if somebody could get that to me at some point, I would appreciate it. Per my email earlier this week, I'm hoping that each of you are staying abreast of what ICS is and what they're doing in our district and what they hope to do in our district. As the equity audit wraps up, let me tell you what likely will happen next. ICS will find BASD systemically racist. It's their MO. I've heard that that's what, it's been 100% of the time is their track record. Then they'll recommend that BASD entered into a 5-year plan with them. Can we even begin to imagine what the cost and time demand will be? And since our superintendent has worked with ICS before in Middleton Cross Plains, he will most likely make the recommendation to the school board that we enter into a 5-year contract with ICS. And this is where things get scary for parents. If a 5-year contract gets signed, our kids, my kids, would be asked to do the work and become covert activists in partnership with teachers against their parents in order to influence parents to get on board with the work. If there was ever a time to ask yourself where you want to be in shaping the future of our district and also how you want to influence relationships between students and parents, now is that time. How will you vote when ICS and our superintendent recommend a 5-year equity contract in order that our community can do the work? What even is the work? If they can't clearly define it, how can they adequately implement it? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Aaron Melby.
Okay. Seeing as there's still nothing on the agenda about curriculum transparency or a curriculum audit, I thought I should address it again. Much of the headaches over the last year might have very well been avoided if there had been a platform for parents and community members to see what children are and are not being taught in BASD. I believe in order to build confidence in our schools and perhaps locate potential ways to improve our education system, we need to implement a curriculum transparency platform available to the public. I'm asking that you add this to the agenda for next month. On the same subject, I've been made aware of some books available in our school libraries, as have you, that I and many other parents consider disturbing and frankly disgusting. The resources available to children in our schools should be age appropriate and should be screened with the philosophy in mind that they are to build positive character and encourage positive behavior. Many of the resources I've seen are antithetical to positive academic and social growth. Therefore, I also ask that a full curriculum and school resource audit be done so that we know what is and is not being offered to our kids in their schools. In regard to communication with the public, I support the idea of a separate listening session dedicated to hearing from concerned community members. However, I would also like to see some level of two-way communication so that we can have questions answered instead of just talking at the board. Thank you.
Thanks. Jacob Merceberg.
Hi, I'm just here to say, regarding the work of anti-racism, I'm sorry it falls on you, but it does. I said back in November to you that in 20 years, we'll begin to see the fruit of your work. Will we have a more just, a more inclusive community, school district? I think it's important for all of you to keep your eye on the long view. We tout in the history of Burlington our abolitionist roots, our abolitionist race history. Well, this is a very logical next step. We are creating the world as we go. You are creating, to the best of your ability, a school district that will be fair and equitable and inclusive, and not one student. The dream would be that not one student is harassed in the hallway for any reason. That's the dream. That's what your work is about. Take the long view. It gets messy down here month to month. But please, look to the long view. We want a better world. We really do.
Thank you. Laura Bielefeld.
Challenged. Okay, everyone hear me? All right. Hello again. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day and Happy Coming Out Day. I can't help but wonder, what did Burlington Area School District teach within their classrooms today? Did you allow the truth to be taught, or did you instead focus on Christopher Columbus? With no mention of the White House issue of a proclamation declaring today, October 11, 2021, Indigenous Peoples Day. Did we focus on the fairy tale of a newly discovered land, or did we teach the truth? That this land beneath our feet was lived on, that families, tribes, and nations had been cultivating and respecting the land for decades. Did you acknowledge National Coming Out Day, or did schools simply carry on as usual? Did teachers and faculty acknowledge students who are openly out? Did you let those who don't feel safe being out within the walls of Burlington Area School District know they are welcome, that they belong, and most importantly, that they are beautiful and worthy of all things? Or did you comply with the status quo? If we had a little bit more transparency in our school's curriculum, we wouldn't be left to wonder and ask these questions. The work, as it has been referred to this evening, is creating unity and inclusivity within our schools and our community. The work is preparing every one of our students for the future they will inherit. It will not look as our present does. You, Burlington Area School District, have that job to do. So tonight, I leave you with this. Burlington Area School District, today and every day, did you teach the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. Misty Gilbert.
Good evening. I'm pretty sure you all know exactly what I'm going to talk about because I sent you some pretty interesting emails. But then I stopped. I love books, and I love that my children love books. My son will read all day long. I have to stop him. But the books that I've been reading, they're not appropriate. Let's see, I realized I was getting nowhere by emailing one book at a time. I was unsure if they were going to be addressed, if I kept with a third, a fourth, a fifth. So I just went on a deep dive. I found books on transsexuals starting in elementary school, like Red, A Crayon Story, and When Aiden Became a Brother. Those are books that should probably be in a guidance office. And if a guidance counselor hears from a teacher concerns, maybe the guidance counselor should talk to the parents and include the parents in on the conversation, not leave them there for the children to pick up. I found books on police shootings and violence, from Something Happened in Our Town in elementary school, basically saying the white people shot the black man for no reason, to Dear Martin and All American Boys, which mainstream the N-word. I found sex books, lots and lots and lots of books of sex, in Karcher and in the high school. And I found a ridiculous amount of racial slurs and so much cursing. One book in Karcher, Good Behavior, 261 pages, and there's 257 uses of the F word in some way, shape, or form. And that's only the beginning of what that book has. I have to ask, what's the thought process here? Who's responsible for putting these books in our libraries, and who will be held accountable? We've trusted you, your administrators, and the teachers with our children, and you've provided them with violence, racist rhetoric, extreme language, content that could be extremely confusing or detrimental to young children, and what can be best described as pornography. You're providing our kids with porn. The solution that was provided after my email about Sex, a book for teens, was that you're planning to have Mr. Heck work with the librarians on the contents in the libraries. Well, I appreciate this plan. My faith in the judgment of the administration and the librarians leaves a whole hell of a lot to be desired. Sorry. Every day I dig a little, and every day I find more. I won't stop. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I've got nothing but time. I'm frustrated and I'm sad. I'm not sad for my kids because they're at home safe, where I can teach them and I can instill morals. But I'm sad for the kids who are still being used in the sick agenda-driven destruction of morality in our schools. We, the parents, elected you, and we will remove you if you don't start working with us. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Jean Heyer.
Good evening. Thank you for your service. I also love books. I read copiously. My children love books. It was the routine in our house for many years while they were attending BASD to read and read and read. I like books because they expose my children to a bigger world and a different one than my own. They carry my children beyond my own limited vision. I didn't think of it, and when we had to make a decision, our children went to Catholic school, grade school, and then we had to make a decision where they were going to go to high school. And we made that decision largely on the part of BASD representing a much bigger world to my children. They would be rubbing elbows with all kinds of different people, and we welcomed that. I expected my teachers, my children's teachers, to do the work. I expected them to expect my children to do the work. I expected my children to do the work, and together we figured out what some of that work was. My children didn't need to read a book in order to be exposed to the N-word. They saw it in there every day. They didn't need to, and preventing them from reading in a book would not have prevented them from experiencing racism. They saw that when we took my children of color, nieces of color, to a grocery store and to Kohl's. So my children were exposed to those things, and the things that they came home from school with that were different than what we thought about, we talked. We talked about, what did you think about that? They knew what was going on. They knew much more than we gave them credit for. They knew what was going on in the news. They knew what their cousins were experiencing. And we talked. So I don't ask you to narrow that vision. I want you and I expect you to widen it and to have conversations. Our kids are out in a very complicated world. The adults are having trouble with what's going on in the world right now. Kids have to learn how to navigate it, and they will navigate it just like you learn how to read a river and in a canoe. You don't do it by standing on the shore. And you do it in the context of teachers who care and maybe who all don't think the same thing, because guess what? That's the world. I knew sending my kids to BASD that there would be teachers who taught very different things than what I personally or my husband agreed with. And that was okay. That was the whole point. Because those are the conversations we needed to have. And that's the work that we need to do. And we can't do it by living in a bubble and putting blinders on. So thank you for the work.
Thank you. Next, we'll have board communication. Anyone on the board have anything? Roseanne, looks like you have something more.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the kids in our district, how they participated in a citywide activity 2 weeks ago. They had the cemetery walk, and I don't know if any of you were there. It was wonderful. Talked a lot about the history of Burlington, the fact that we have people buried under Cooper School. There's a stone there, which I found to be interesting. But anyway, we had a teacher that was there taking the part of Florence Patterson, who was a nurse, and she is identified in the Racine Museum as well as one of the most important women in Racine County. But our person was Stephanie Rumler, who acted the part of her, and she is one of our instructors, one of our teachers, and she just did a wonderful job. And then quite a few students were there, and they've been directing the groups. They had a group of the slower walkers, and then those that could go a little faster and so forth, and they were the most wonderful kids. I talked to them as I was walking around, and they were so happy to be there and do something for the community. I think I just wanted to say I was very proud of that teacher, and I was very proud of the kids that were there.
Yeah, thanks, Roseanne. Any other board members? Communications. Barry.
I'd just like to thank all the staff that contributed to the homecoming this weekend. Helped all the kids enjoy a good time, kept everyone safe. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Barry. Anybody else? Okay, next will be the superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of updates, and I'll follow with Barry's comments about homecoming. Kudos to the high school staff, and I know our students were really quite thrilled to be able to have the homecoming experience. It's been a couple of years, and so that was a nice opportunity. Also want to thank both Julie Thomas and Toby Green for helping to recognize School Board Member Week, which was officially last week in Wisconsin, with just a little applause to you and an appreciation and the jam that goes with it that's in front of you tonight, just to be able to say thank you for your service as well. 2 upcoming dates. One is tomorrow. We'll be doing an official ribbon cutting ceremony. I believe Board President Peter Turk here will actually have the scissors in his hand as we now officially dedicate the opening of Karcher Middle School. That's tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and certainly, we've wanted to communicate to the community as well that that's open for walking through, and then we'll do a much more kind of big splash, if you will, in the spring when the site is a little bit more complete and the school's actually finished as well. Also coming up next week is the Wisconsin Association of School Boards Region 13 meeting. So I know some of you are planning to attend that in Elkhorn or virtually. And so I want to make note that the position that Roseanne holds as Region 13 Director will be voted on as well next week, Wednesday. So kind of stay tuned for that. And then Also, 2 weeks from tonight will be the fourth Monday of October. That is a date that is always set aside for the approval of our tax levy, so that is October 25th, and so that will be our special meeting for October. Other than that, nothing, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next, Taylor, if you'll take us through the bank statement and bills, please.
Sure. The September 2021 bank statement bills, total beginning cash on hand is $565,376.08. Under revenues and deposits, total deposits is $13,961,734.62, which leaves us total available cash on hand at $14,527,101.70. Expenditures and withdrawals. The total withdrawals is $13,622,747.06. Leaves us with total ending cash on hand, $904,354.64. And of course, that there's no variance. I put that in form of motion to accept the September 2021 bank statement reconciliation report as presented.
All right, a motion's been made and seconded. We didn't hear it was buried at the second. No. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Taylor, you want to do the,
Sure. I make a motion that we approve the September 2021 AP check register as presented. Basically, to pay the bills.
Second.
yeah, thanks, Susie. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of paying of the September bills, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, motion's approved. Moving on to personnel matters. Earlier this evening, the Personnel Committee of the board met, and I guess, Steve, I'll have you go through the resignations, retirements, and terminations.
We had 4 resignations, terminations, retirements that included 2 substitute teachers. Hold on, sorry, I'm in the wrong spot. That included just the 2 folks, Julie Chappelle from Cooper Elementary, who's a special education aide with us, and Summer Markham, who was attendance secretary at BHS, with just those 2.
And our Personnel Committee had recommended approval of those 2 resignations. So I entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, they're approved. Steve, you want to take us through the appointments for certified and non-certified staff?
Yeah, as we fill out some of our open positions for this semester, we are bringing forward 4 certified staff appointments. That's 2 substitute teachers, Emily Battisti and Kali Morosky as substitute teachers for the district. And then we also had occupational therapist Deb Jerome and Kristen Suter as an increase from 0.84 to 100% at Lions and BHS. Those are our certified staff appointments, those 4. And then we had 8 positions, non-certified staff positions. We had 3 of those are custodians. We have part-time custodian Jeffrey Delp at Dyer Elementary. Ashley Dorrington at Waller Elementary is part-time custodian. And Margaret Rice, part-time custodian at BHS. We also had 3 special education aides. That is Stephen Eckert at BHS, Jennifer Shepard at Karcher, and Jennifer Whiskies at Dyer. Those are special education aides. And then finally, we also had Megan Stafford, attendance secretary at BHS, and Megan Weisenborn, substitute aide at BASD.
Thanks, Steve. And again, earlier this evening, the Personnel Committee recommended that we approve all of these appointments. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, the appointments are approved. Next, we're moving on to consent items. We have 2 donations in student travel, and we have a long list of donations. Steve, will you take us through? And I think it looks like a lot for the high school, so I know Mr. Burling wants to join into your. Yeah.
Did you want to
Sure.
come on? Okay.
He doesn't need a
Start with
microphone.
BASD, go see, that's first.
We'll pause here for Burlington High School and come back and mention that at Cooper Elementary School, we had a couple of generous donations of both daily bars for students and staff from Dairy Queen, kind of at approximately $518. There was also by Denise Klatt of Wheaton, some supplies for recess for the students. And then also Denise Klatt for Lyons and Waller, the same supplies, and kind of hard to put a number to those, but we still wanted to offer our appreciation to Denise for those donations.
Awesome. So let's give a nice hand for the Wolfpack Motorcycle Club out of Kenosha. They donated 40 backpacks full of school supplies to our district, along with community member Denise Wheaton also donated school supplies to our district. So thank you for that. As we thought things were getting back to normal, boys volleyball hosted a fairly large invitational a few weekends ago. Sarah Governor contributed $250 to help fund some of the food for the concession stand to offset and to allow them to make some more profit off their concessions. Dance team was Tracy Weiss, donated $500. Really wonderful event. Unfortunately, the 20-year anniversary of 9/11 to commemorate the first responders who gave their lives and their energies to get us through those events. We wanted to celebrate our first responders in our community, and we recognize the city and the surrounding townships, police, fire, EMT squads at the football game, and Flight for Life actually came and delivered the flag, and then we did a flag raising with our city ladder truck. I believe that's a 12-story ladder truck that we have in town, or 20-story, I can't remember. But they raised the flag with that, but the helicopter actually landed at the middle of the field. Guys got out, delivered the flag to Chief, it was Chief Babe, or Chief Babe, and the helicopter got up, did a 360 and flew off, and we presented all of the first responders from all the townships in the city with a really nice Demon sweatshirt or Demon t-shirt with a B, but the inside of the B was flag, it was a stars and stripes, and it was pretty cool. So to offset the cost of the t-shirts, we had wonderful donations from Scott Austin, Becky Sagal, Miller Ford, Chris Miller, obviously, Anderson Chiropractic, Mike Anderson, and Bear Realty, Joe Bush donated so we can give those t-shirts free to the first responders. This kind of commemoration of that event. So it was a really wonderful night. Our FFA has been busy as all get out, especially October, it's a really busy month, but $40 from Beth Morgan for that. And then as we all know, WBSD is back up and running, and it's really exciting. They actually had their first 3 student meetings again, so that a whole other group of students that can connect to our high school. But as you know, the sponsorships continue to roll in, so please accept the sponsorships for WBSD, Community State Bank, $500, Musicology, Joel Draven for $250, Greenwood State Bank, $250, Shooty Daniels, Funeral Home, $250, Fred's Parking, $500, Jewelry Center, $500, BDQ LLC, Stephen and Julie Nelson, $250, Performance Tire, $500, Jackson Wine LLC, $500, BSD Merton's Auto and Towing, $500, and Perfection Auto Body, that's Clayton Cruz, for $500. So again, we have a very generous community. I appreciate that you all send letters out to me too, because again, I love the support for the community. They really help us in some of our programming. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve and Eric. Next, we have a student trip for discussion. Stephen, you want to do that? Oh, yeah.
I move we approve these very generous donations from all of our donors, and thank you, community.
Second.
All right, motions are made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, now let's move on to student travel.
Yes, thank you. We do bring overnight field trips to the board for approval, and this ask is coming from One Act to attend the One Act Theater Contest in November on the 19th and 20th in Stevens Point. And so we just ask for your approval for them to attend.
I make a motion that we accept the Stevens Point trip.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right.
Just a point of information, on Thursday at 3:45, they're doing a taping of their presentation, just in case something were to happen where that event got canceled. They will obviously be able to do video submissions, but if anybody's interested in seeing Green Gables, the one at play, you're more than welcome at 3:45. The Steelers been putting that out, it's been on their social media.
Here in the auditorium?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. All right. Moving on. We have 4 items for information or discussion tonight. The first 2 are teaching and learning, I guess is curriculum, and then I believe Joe Slater will be presenting on both.
What's going on? I don't know if I really need a microphone either. Do you think I do or no? Okay, I was in a musical back in the day when I was in high school, and I remember them telling me that everyone else needs to speak up until you're good. So hopefully you can hear me just fine.
Can we just use one for the people that are watching? On the live stream?
Oh, I got it.
Girls doesn't have to do the screen. It's my computer. There you go. Okay. All right, so it is a pleasure to be able to speak in front of the board tonight in regard to teaching and learning, specifically when it comes to grading and reporting, and just wanting to give some updates on the work that our staff has been doing over the last couple of years. So the first thing to remind everyone of is our strategic focus over time. We've been kind of focusing on these now for the last 3 to 5 years. They are sometimes called in the district as our big three, but our essential skills really focuses around our standards and clearly articulated learning goals, ensuring that we're working towards proficiency. Best instructional practices relates to how we are instructing in the classroom, really focused on what that instruction looks like. And then universal access really ensures that we are providing and ensuring there's a sense of belonging for all students. And our practices, policies, and procedures also echo that. So those are the three basic strategic focuses throughout the district that we are always at the basis of all of our decisions and planning. Today, really wanting to focus around the essential skill framework, so that top one that referenced the clearly articulated learning goals. The three things that we'll talk about today is some conversation behind curriculum, assessment, and then also grading and reporting. These are, again, three things that our teachers and our committees have been working on over the last few years. This goes back to just what is really essential skills. It is a term that we use frequently within the school district that you probably will hear teachers reference and be able to speak to. And really essential skills is basing everything off of proficiency of state standards. So really ensuring that we have a clear understanding of what proficiency really is, and then setting that as the benchmark to ensure we're doing everything we can to have every student reach proficiency on all grade level standards throughout all K through 12 classrooms. Sometimes essential skills can be called different things in different school districts. So just wanted to be able to reference this as some in the audience and or on the board, if you've gone to some conferences or spoken to other people in other districts, sometimes essential skills could be termed something different, like power standards, essential learning targets. They all really are referencing the exact same thing. So they're all focusing back on trying to ensure that all students reach grade level proficiency. So all of these words, same thing, just different terms depending on the school district. So the first one I really want to touch on relates to curriculum. So as I shared, we adopted the Wisconsin Academic Standards. As a board, you approve these back in August every year that we bring those to you. So based on those academic standards, our teachers have been working on something that we call at-a-glance documents. So this is an example of one here on the right. So this is 7th grade English Language Arts. And what an at-a-glance document really is showing is it will talk about what our overarching essential skills are. So for English Language Arts, it would be writing, reading, and then speaking and listening. Again, those stem back from the state standards. And then within those areas, we call them sub-skills. So what are the skills within each of the essential skills that are important for our students to be able to reach proficiency on? So you can see in writing, the sub-skills there are when a student is putting together a piece of writing, it is important for them to be able to have the piece be organized, that they have elaboration, strong craft, their conventions are there, and then also vocabulary. Again, these all stem from the state standards, and these are aligned to 7th grade grade level standards as well. So this does ebb and flow, of course, to a learning progression, K-12, so that as you progress through the grade levels, the proficiency of the at-a-glance documents also progresses. You're seeing a simplified version of what our teachers utilize. This over time, the goal would be once we have all of these completed and ready, this is probably what we would want to be utilizing on the website in order for us to show what we're doing K-12 when it comes to all of our coursework. With each of these at-a-glance documents, our staff are also putting together what we're calling frequently utilized resources, so that we also can supply a list of resource items that are going along with the curriculum. I do think sometimes there's confusion on the difference of what we mean by the word curriculum versus resources and instruction. So curriculum to us is really the state standards. So that is what is proficiency? What are the students trying to work towards? So our curriculum is always based off of the adopted Wisconsin state standards. The frequently utilized resources are the things that our teachers utilize within the classroom in order to instruct our students and provide activities and tasks for them to do in order for them to practice and demonstrate proficiency in the classroom. So just wanting you to know the difference between those terms and also be on the lookout for what our staff are starting to work on or have been working on. This is another example. So we have this, especially at the middle school level, we have these fairly ready, and we're utilizing them currently this school year with the standards-based gradebook. But you can see that there's alignment from the left is the adopted state standards. So it might be a little tricky to see in the audience, but it does say ratios and proportional relationships up there that I circled there on the left. And then you can see ratios and proportions over on the right within our essential skill language. So this correlation is our staff really taking the academic standards, putting them into our language here within the school district, and then they're working on rubrics that are much more detailed in order for them to be able to assess where a student is at, if they're beginning, developing, proficient, or exceeding the standard. Here's just another example of that in English. So you can see key ideas and details is over on the left, and that's again from the state standards. And then you can see how that correlates over to reading on the right for our essential skill work. Our at-a-glance documents, as I mentioned, are in the finished stage at the middle school level, and we are in the implementation now, utilizing them with our standards-based gradebook. Our 4K through 5 and then our high school staff are still in the developmental stage of putting theirs together. So we really first wanted our staff to work on developing their rubrics, so that detailed language that they're utilizing within the classroom. Then once they have that done, their at-a-glance document is put together, and then we utilize that to correlate it to Skyward and also for us to utilize for our grading practices. What's really nice about this is it ensures that we're aligned 4K through 12 across the school district. It also is a really good way to benchmark and ensure that we are progressing through our grade levels and ensuring that proficiency in 3rd grade jumps up a level when you get to 4th grade, right? And jumps up a level of 5th grade. Are we interpreting the standards correctly and ensuring that we really are pushing our students towards proficiency? That alignment is there, K-12 then. And then it also defines the success criteria, which is also very important for students to be able to see, so that they can see that rubric right away and they'll know, in order for me to achieve proficiency, this is what I need to do. So that rubric language is there and provided for students. It also really guides our teaching and learning, as it really allows our teachers to be able to assess quickly to determine which students are proficient and which ones are still needing some assistance. Then once we have our rubrics developed, our teachers moved on to working on having some common formative and common summative assessments across the classrooms. So that's part 2 that I'm going to move into here, is in relation to assessment. Assessment really to us is all about feedback and ensuring that we're giving timely feedback to our students so that they have a strong understanding of where they are at in their learning progression as they progress through the grade levels. Two types of assessment that you probably hear being kicked around a lot in education is formative and summative. The easiest way to remember the difference is that formative really is for learning. So this is like, if you were to if you're working on driving, right? I'm 15 years old and I'm starting to want to get my driver's license. When I'm driving around with the driver that's, has the extra pedal in the car and is assisting you, and he or she's giving you a lot of feedback, and hey, you took your turn really wide right there, make sure that at the stop sign you didn't take a full stop, those kind of things, that's that formative learning and that formative feedback to the student right away. So it's very timely, and it is taking place when practice is still going on. So formative is always taking place when it is focused around ensuring that we're providing practice and feedback around that practice before we get to the summative. So the summative is really of learning, so think of it more at the end, right? The sum of everything. Now I'm at the DMV and I have to take my driver's test, right? So that's a summative assessment at that time. So I am now having to show my skills. I'm not really getting much feedback on that as much. I'm wanting to see how well you can now drive in order to determine if you get to have your driver's license, right? So big difference there on formative versus summative. Our teachers spend most of their time on formative assessments with students because, of course, our focus is more on ensuring that we're practicing and seeing that growth with students. Then at the end, the students would then be demonstrating their level of proficiency and understanding on a summative. When we work on formative assessments with our students, usually we're focused on one sub-skill at a time. So we tend to not focus on multiple sub-skills at the same time. So if I went back to an at-a-glance document and I was focused on writing, instead of talking about, hey, Kevin, you need to work on your organization, elaboration, craft, and conventions, a formative would be collecting some data from the students in order to just be giving them timely feedback on organization and how they're doing with their organization of writing at that moment. A summative then would be a collection of multiple sub-skills at the same time, where I'm wanting that essay back from the students, where I'm going to be assessing them on multiple sub-skills or all of those proficiencies at the same time. The intent really is to move towards ensuring that when you start to shift into a model like we are doing, we're really wanting to be much more intentional about that feedback that we give to students. If we go back to a traditional mindset of grading and learning, it is difficult to give timely and specific feedback to students because we used to teach from a lens of very topic-based. So we might have an entire unit on cells, for example, in science, and we have 50 questions, and they're all just mixed up questions, if you will, where it's very difficult to tell which skill is being assessed. So at the very end, I get 80% on the assessment, and hey, nice job, you get 80% on your knowledge on cells. We have shifted as not just Burlington, but the shift as a state is really towards, and as a nation, is really to shift more towards focusing on skills. And being able to be much more intentional about providing students with practice and working towards proficiency on skills while using content. So we use the content to teach the skills, but it's the skill that is being assessed. So it's much more intentional. And another good way to think about it too, when you start thinking about why the shift, is kind of if we were to go in for glaucoma surgery, right? I don't know about you, but I don't want to necessarily go to a doctor who is wanting to use practices that are 5, even 10-year-old practices. I want to go to a doctor who is up to par, working on current research when it comes to that glaucoma surgery, so that I can ensure that my eye is going to get the best services and best chances of moving forward, right? So we too have shifted into that mindset of ensuring we are moving forward with best practices when it comes to those changes with grading and learning as a school district. When I was speaking of the rubric our teachers work through a rubric first to get to that at a glance document. This is just an example of a bit more of an overarching thought process behind those rubrics. So this helps our teachers think through what is a beginning level question, or how do I assess a student at a beginning level versus developing versus proficient, and then what does something that is exceeding really look like? So this is not the rubric that everyone uses. This rubric language just helps them be able to then transpose this over to the content area and the skills that they are working with students on for proficiency. So now that we have our rubrics developed, our at a glance documents, our teachers are using formative and summative assessments in order to inform instruction and students of their learning. We really get to that third part, which is grading and reporting. So how does this then end up in the gradebook, and how do we report things out for parents and students? So again, this really to me is, hopefully you see this in the slides up here when we show a traditional gradebook from a couple of years ago here in Burlington to now. Our grading practices have shifted where if I was wanting to give you some feedback around cooking, our former test that we would have taken in biology class on the cells, right? Here's your 80% on cells overall. This would be the top paragraph saying, hey, you need to work on your cooking skills. Now we're wanting to give much more specific feedback, and instead of just talking about your cooking skills, we want students to know it's actually the kneading that is your kneading skills behind working with bread that you really need to improve on when it comes to your cooking skills. Much more specific, and then it even gets even more specific than that. But you can see that the level of feedback for students is much more specific than it would have been in the past. So essential skill thought process is that we focus on proficiency, which is that grade level standard, and it's very specific around that skill development. And students would demonstrate their level of proficiency at different moments in time potentially. So we would have also all taken an assessment on the same day. So Tuesday is when we're going to take the assessment for cells. That would have been what we maybe traditionally have done in the past. What we focus on more so now is when the teachers feel the students are ready to take a summative, right? I'm ready to go to the DMV to take that driver's test. That's when the student then would take that summative. So not all students necessarily would take a summative at the same time. The teacher and the students would work together to determine when is the right moment for them to be able to take that summative and demonstrate their level of proficiency. In the past, the traditional thought process would have been just accumulation of the entire unit. All of us are going to take that assessment and we're moving on. If we have students that don't perform that well on a summative, in an essential skill mindset, which is where we are now, if I don't perform that well on that summative and I'm not proficient, a student does have the ability to do a redo retake to be able to show their level of proficiency at another time. Because it's really not about trying to ensure that on Tuesday is when we're gonna make sure that you know how to drive a car, right? If I don't pass at the DMV, I go back, I practice, and then I get to come back to the DMV and take the assessment again. Same concept, we're wanting students to be able to reach proficiency and ensure that we get them to that proficiency, and it doesn't necessarily have to all take place always at the same time. So when we put it all together, the evidence piece at the very bottom there, that is what the teachers collect. Again, that's that formative and summative data. It then is data being collected for a specific sub-skill. Those sub-skills then make up our essential skills. Our essential skills then make up the overall class grade. Now you can see that in the grade book, we use numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the numbers that you would see in a grade book at Kircher Middle School right now. So there is no 80%, 20%, any number, anything that relates to percentages anymore. It is just a proficiency is a 3, and that relates to the rubric language. And proficiency is that grade level standard. So that's always the goal. If you're exceeding proficiency, then a student would score a 4. And then if we're still working on getting to grade level proficiency, you would be scoring a 1 or a 2. Insufficient evidence is an IE. That to us is we don't have enough evidence right now in order to determine where you're at with a specific standard or with a specific sub-skill. Now, overall, we want to keep letter grades at the middle school and high school. So we are doing that right now at the middle school. We do have a committee that is a K-12 committee that's split off then into K-5 and 6-12. That committee develops what we feel would be the best plan of action when it comes to what grades we assign to this work at the very end of a grading period. So what we came up with as a team is this grading scale. IE then would, of course, convert over into a failing score at the end of a grading period. So when there isn't enough evidence, then the student wouldn't pass the class. Otherwise, we're going with the A+ is students who are exceeding that grade level standard. Proficient would be A, developing as a B, and beginning as a C. This might be tweaked a bit as we progress through this school year, as the middle school is a bit of a pilot this year prior to implementing this at the high school level. This is an example of the difference between an essential skill grade book that you would see on the parent side. So the one on the left is showing what an essential skill grades would look like for your student. This really is real time for us. That's why you'll see that the little book is showing up where some of those skills and proficiencies haven't been assessed yet. And then over on the right is a traditional report card or grade book that you would see. So when you look at the grade book in the orange, right, the traditional report card or grading piece that you'd see in Skyward, what would you say that that student needs to work on the most? This is a question. Filling and wrapping. Any other thoughts? Homework? FW 3.1WS, right. I know what that is, right? Any other thoughts there on the right? Guided notes. What about on the left? Remember, proficiency is grade level standards, so that's a 3. And then beginning developing would be a 1 or a 2, and exceeding the grade level standard would be a 4. What would you say a student needs to work on that's on the left? Number lines?
Absolute value.
Absolute value.
Ratios.
Ratios and proportions.
The blanks assessed or made.
Yep, blank, good question. Barry asked if the blanks are unassessed, and the answer is yes. So we're just a few weeks into school still, so not all standards have been assessed yet. But you can see that on the left is much more specific towards actual proficiency of skills, where on the right it involves everything from participation is in the academic grade. You can see class participation there in the middle. There's a participation of 5% at the top. A lot of homework is playing into the student's grade. So when we shift over to this essential skills work, we also separated out behaviors from academics. So in the past, our traditional report card would have included all of those behaviors into the grade book. So when we really say, oh, your student is, got a B in math, that B in math really was computed up of everything under the sun when it comes to my homework, which is really my work ethic of getting the responsibility of getting things done, participation in class, did I do my notes, all of those things are playing into the grade. On the left, the only thing that's being assessed on the left is actual academic standards. So we have taken out the behaviors from the academic side. Now we are not reporting those. We are simply saying that every time that you put something in the grade book, it really should be representing one thing. It can't be everything under the sun because otherwise it's not very specific feedback. So when we do any grading here in Burlington, everything is very specific and focused on one skill at a time. And that way, we as teachers are able to inform our instruction. Students are able to understand where they're at in their growth process in learning. And parents also have a stronger understanding of what their students need to work on and or what they're reaching proficiency on at that time. So I just referenced that we are separating behaviors from academics. This is something that our K-12 Essential Skill Committee put together last year. This is called our BASD Work and Learning Habits. As a team, we narrowed it down to be respectful, be responsible, be ready. So those are the 3 essential skills for the behavior side. And then the sub-skills underneath are the ones in gray. So you can see be respectful has be respectful when it comes to our interactions and our attitude. So in the grade book, we do have a class that is called BASD Work and Learning Habits. So you can see here, we have taken out those behaviors from the academic side, but we're still wanting to report them out so that students know what they need to work on when it comes to work and learning habits, but also that their families can also see that as well. So here you could also gather what is the student proficient in versus what do they need to work on. Efforts, what they would need to work on, right? Where their interactions and their respect towards staff and classmates is right on par of what we're hoping for. They just need to work on their effort when it comes to completing all necessary tasks within the school. And then the ones where you see blanks, they have not been assessed yet. But overall, just wanting to be able to hit on those 3 topics. So again, what our curriculum is, what we're working on with that, what it is that we do when it comes to assessment with formative and summative assessments, and then what our grading then looks like on the side of Skyward on how we ensure that we're providing feedback and information to families and students when it comes to the final grade. Any questions?
I have one. So when you have the 1, 2, 3, 4 beginning development proficient, are you ever going to see any half numbers like 2.5, or is it always going to be a whole number evaluation of this sub-skill set?
Yep. So this was a strong debate for a while among our teacher team as well, wanting to be able to have more levels of increments. Research would say otherwise, that when we really need to decide if a student is proficient, they're proficient. If they're not quite there, right? So if they're not quite there, it's a 2, and that's a 2 right now, right? So I'm still developing, but I always have a chance to reach that proficiency, either in my practice leading up to a summative and or on the summative. If I'm not proficient, I have the ability to demonstrate again by doing a redo retake after some additional practice took place. So there are not any half increments, but when you do see it in the grade book, you'll probably see, you see number system says a 2.3 there. That's because it is taking that the additive inverse and the absolute value And then using the number line, those are 3 different sub-skills that are all components of the number system. So it's going to take all of these sub-skills for number system and let you know what your overall score would be for number system. So that's where you would see a number that is not a whole number.
Skyward's versus grade book or is it elements?
Good question. So he asked if Skyward supports this level of the grade book. Yes and no. So there's still some tweaks that is on the Skyward side of things that Skyward wants it to be traditional still in some ways. So we just have to work around those tweaks, but we've been ironing those out as we go. So again, this year is really implementation at the middle school. And throughout this school year, we'll see if, the implementation is ensuring that it's doing everything that we want it to do. And if it isn't, we'll make some tweaks to it this year prior to rolling it out next year. But it is much more user-friendly for the students, the staff, and families when it comes to really showing you what it is the student can and cannot do or knows and still needs to work on when it comes to proficiency of grade level standards.
What's the feedback been this far with staff and parents? I know it's early.
So there was, yep, so there was some confusion from parents a little bit with formatives being in the grade book because formatives are really no count because it's for learning. So a formative should not penalize the student's overall grade. The only thing that would play into a student's grade are summative assessments. So when they see a formative in the grade book, those are showing up as no count. So the team had a conversation of, do we just put summatives in the grade book? So there's not confusion of, well, wait a minute, why are you saying this doesn't count? Does that mean my student didn't turn something in? It's like, no, it's just, we're not counting practice towards students' overall proficiency. So we're making tweaks like that right now, and really taking feedback from families. Our staff, it is an adjustment for them. It's a very different way of grading. Karcher, especially the 7th and 8th grade teachers, they've had a behind-the-scenes practice grade book for the last 2 years because the plan was to roll this out last year, but with COVID, we decided to wait a year. So they have had a behind-the-scenes grade book to play around with in the last 2 years. But now when it's really rubber to the road and we're utilizing it now, they do see huge benefit in it because it has really helped them understand where individual students are at in their learning in the classroom compared to a traditional way of assessing.
So I guess from an accountability standpoint, what is the accountability standpoint for students?
And what do you mean by that?
I guess, so the student fails the test, and you let them the fail exam, and you let them retake it. Is that it? Just keep letting them retake it again? Or I guess there's a lot, I know we're only focused on middle school right now, but obviously the plan is at some point to roll this out district-wide, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we have some overarching procedures and practices that are set in place when it comes to redos, retakes. So I can't just come in and take an assessment, not have really put any effort into it, and then tomorrow can I just take it again now that I got to see what was on the assessment? I don't know if that's what you're getting at. So that is not how we're going about things when it comes to that. Our goal is that a student doesn't take that assessment until they're ready, right? And our staff are giving summatives when they feel like the class is ready, right? And then if I don't score very well on the summative, I had shared that there's multiple sub-skills that are being assessed on a summative. I might have been proficient in 3 of them, but 2 of them I was not. So if I'm wanting to bring up my score on those 2 and be able to show you that I can do proficient level work, I have to first do practice, probably meet with you. It's up to each teacher on how they want to support the student to go back to formative again. So obviously I have more learning I have to do. So I have to show that I'm putting in the effort there to continue to put in some practice. Just like if I went to the DMV, I failed the driver's test. I gotta go home and practice some more with family members or something like that, right? Before I take the driver's test again. So same kind of a concept here for us. So that's where I would say the accountability comes in for students.
Board members, other questions? Yeah.
It's been a lot of work for our teachers. So they're doing a really great job of ensuring that we really analyze what proficiency really means. And then ultimately at the very end, which will be a different topic of presentation at some time, but what's going to be really awesome is that our gradebook language, our diagnostics like iReady and the pre-ACT, and then all of our speed assessments, so the ACT Aspire, Forward Exam, all of those are going to be able to talk to each other. So if I'm looking at Kevin Bird, for example, if I'm proficient in all of my essential skills within the classroom work, but I'm not proficient on the Forward Exam or my diagnostics, then we need to make some adjustments to our understanding of proficiency in the classroom. And or we're able to really see if 80% of our students are underperforming on key ideas and details, we know exactly where that is within our curriculum in order to make some adjustments to that to hopefully bring up that skill for all students then.
Jill, I guess I have one other thought, and I'm sure I'm gonna have more after the meeting. So
Yes.
board members will probably revisit this at some point. You don't get all your questions answered tonight. This is a major shift in a lot of work I'm going to have. But my question is, other districts using this kind of assessment methodology? We're not out there.
No, if we didn't start making this shift, we would start to fall behind in the sense of what is best practice. So this is very common across school districts. The only differences I would say are more so if school districts decide to keep letter grades, not keep letter grades, those kind of things at the high school level. Some school districts have decided to move away from letter grades, and then they met a lot of resistance from families because families don't really understand what a P is, or what, they get nervous on transcripts, things like that. We didn't want to have that worry on students or families' part, so we are staying with the letter grades at the upper grade levels. We're also infusing letter grades starting in the middle school. We didn't necessarily need to do that, but wanting to ensure that families start to understand how it all works prior to going into the high school where grades do matter towards graduation for high school, et cetera.
Do you anticipate a shift in the ACT testing then?
Yes, that's the goal, is that we.
No, I'm saying like the way you perform today. If you want to take the ACT, you take all parts of the ACT except for writing, right? So if you want to get a better ACT score, you go back and you take a whole ACT bonus, go back and take English.
Oh, do I anticipate that happening with just the ACT?
Yeah.
Man, that would be nice.
You're testing of national testing to follow this guide. I mean, that's what it is as a CPA. You fail a certain area.
Right, you just have to work on that area. Yeah. That's a really good question, Kevin. Something for us to pay attention to, and when we have conversations with people in DPI to kind of push on that. It is not my understanding that's a route that they're going right now. But that is something that would be really interesting to be able to hopefully go down, in years to come.
Kevin, if I may, it is interesting though, ACT about 5 years back did change their retake policy to create a super score. So in effect, I could go and take an ACT 5 or 6 times and then use my highest score.
Highest score in each.
Yeah, and now they're allowing it in each area. So it's an interesting journey that I think ACT's been on, and I agree with Joe.
They still have to sit there.
Right, we haven't heard that yet, but I wouldn't be surprised, and it's an interesting question that I think.
Yeah, they take the highest score of their cumulative over that.
I think different colleges recognize the super score and some don't, so it's kind of a hodgepodge of assessment. Some colleges don't even use ACT result.
Yeah.
So in high school, the kids are getting traditional letter grades, A, B, C, D, F, is that correct?
Right now, that is the model that we have at the middle school. We want to see if it ends up being what we do want to move forward with at the high school. It potentially will stay exactly as I showed. It potentially would shift a little bit based on what we feel like is best for students. But right now, yes, it would be this model, and then the IE would turn into an F if there's not enough evidence for us to give you a grade.
So A plus A, B, C, those are that, or an IE, those are the grades that they're getting now.
Right now at Karcher Middle School, yes.
And that correlates then with those 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Does it, so if you're, so a C is not what I think of as a traditional C, which is average. That's not what a C is. A C is beginning, that you're starting to show some grade level under C. Is that correct? So we
That's
gotta
correct.
think of it completely all different.
Yes, that'd be a correct way to think about it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's confusing.
Well,
It's
it's,
taking your teachers a while.
yeah, well, that's where we are trying to stick with something that, as a parent, if you only pay attention to a student's overall grade, hopefully they understand that B is, I'm not quite there, but B is pretty solid, right? So that's the developing, right? Because that's what we would equate our essential skill work to. So we're wanting to ensure that the way that it all computes out at the very end is what one would assume without having to worry so much about, wait, so what's the 3.2? So as a parent, you just can focus still on that overall grade and feel like you understand what a C would mean to you in the traditional sense would still carry over to now. So we're really wanting to ensure that kind of a thought process remains the same, so it's not confusing for families. Because realistically, to us, we don't want the conversation to be worried about a grade. The whole basis of moving into a essential skill mindset is that our hope and goal is that students are focused on growth and learning and ensuring that they're working towards grade level proficiency. That's how our teachers talk to students. We have moved away from you got a C on that, or you only got a 60% on that, right? Like that is not what our focus is on. Our focus is on, hey, we still need to work on the ratios and proportions. Like let me pull you into a strategy group so we can really understand your thinking, so I can kind of diagnose where the issue is. When it comes to number sense, we're pretty solid there. So our conversations behind the scenes is more so focused on ensuring we're getting students to grade level proficiency while wanting to ensure parents aren't worried about at the very end what grade the student would get.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about when it comes time for to apply for colleges?
Colleges are only going to see those letter grades. So everything that is in the darkest gray there where it says the proficiency scale, that's just on our end in Skyward. So on a transcript, a student would still have a letter grade because that is what we don't want families to have to worry about and get anxious about. Letter grades are letter grades. They're still there in the transcript just like they are now. It will not look different.
It's gonna be the traditional letter grades, or it's gonna be those letter grades, which are not traditional.
When you say traditional, are you?
A, B, C, D, F, those are traditional that the college would look at. Or are they gonna see
So
A
college-
plus A, B, C, but then thinking a C is an average score, when it's not, in this thing, it's
I mean, I'm just wondering, do colleges get this, or do they not get this? And how does it affect?
I would say colleges understand this, but I also think that that's a hard one, Susan, to really want to try to compute this over, because, for example, if you were to go to Pewaukee right now, their letter grades are A, B, B, C, C, D, you know, like at the high school. And then you'll go to another high school that has A plus, A minus, right? And then you go to another high school that is using something totally different. So colleges don't put that much weight and bearing on a student's transcript. It's one element. And we just simply want to ensure that we don't set our students up to be in a position where our grading scale hinders their ability and or doesn't show their true level of understanding of the standards. Yeah.
So one of the biggest barriers to change is fear. And fear comes from not understanding things. Parents, especially in those early years, they grew up with ABCD, etc. What are we doing proactively to explain this to them rather than the work our time comes in? Because in their minds, I will not shot this if I screw this up, my kid's ruined for life. What are we doing to explain this to parents so they understand how this is a positive change?
Well, our hope is that the change though, Barry, is more internal, where at the very end, we still have letter grades.
I
So,
agree, but you said this, parents are already confused with what they're seeing.
They're not, what they're just unsure about is when they see something in the grade book, they're assuming it impacts the grade, right? Because that's what it always used to do before. So we're just saying, okay, maybe we don't need to put in the formative assessments into the grade book if that's confusing the parents. That's really easy to make an adjustment on. We want to ensure that when they look in the grade book, they're like, oh, I understand that all of this stuff that you put in here as teachers is impacting my students' letter grade, which is a B.
Right.
You know,
But
so.
I personally, I think more information is better because then they can understand what's going on. But do we have a way to communicate to them why this is done this way?
So all of our teachers have shared information out with families. And then Nick Ryan, principal at the middle school, has shared information with families. And as they come up through the elementary school, the elementary schools are also going to be modeling using the same language, same numbers, same, so that understanding is going to flow through K-12. So our hope is that it really is something that is easy for families to wrap their heads around, which again, to me, the scene of formative in the grade book that was a no count isn't like that didn't happen before. There were things teachers would have put in last year that they would say was a no count because at Karcher homework wasn't graded towards overall grade. But some staff still put homework into the grade book, right? We're just trying to simplify things as much as possible. And if we decide to put formatives in, families and students can always reach back out to the teacher to understand. They're the best ones to reach back out to and say, hey, can you explain how this piece of evidence really plays into my students' overall score? And then the teachers are going to be very articulate on being able to explain that.
We may have had some grand inquisitions in my own house.
Yeah.
Over why is this an MC? So.
Yeah, there's been some hot seats.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say, Jill, too, that a typical progression for a student during a semester might be starting at a 1, for example, and then move upward as they gain those sub-skills? Towards a 2 and then potentially a 3 and a 4?
Right.
And they wouldn't necessarily start with a 3 and go back to 1 because once they gain the sub-skill, it'd be very unusual or impossible to go back to that.
Not necessarily. So the biggest thing that we're trying to ensure also is that a student has the ability for that skill to transfer over from one concept or thought to another. So what our staff are tending to also focus on is ensuring that we spiral standards back in throughout the school year, so our sub-skills. So it might be a sub-skill that we focus on a lot in September, and I'm proficient in September, right? I like to refer to it as like packing a parachute, right? Like, so super important that I pack it correctly, right? Because if I jump out of the airplane, it's not gonna go so well if I didn't pack it very well. So, right. So, 2 shots is good. So I'm gonna ensure that I'm proficient at packing my parachute before I go get on the plane, right, to go. 3 months later, I'm gonna want to reassess and make sure that I can still pack the parachute correctly, right, before I go jump out the plane again. So that's that spiraling those standards back in, ensuring that over time, a student can maintain being proficient. So I might be 1 in September, and then I might be proficient to 3 in November, and then I might be a 1 again in January. It just means I need to practice again, right? So that I can hopefully hold that standard and be able to have that transfer skill no matter what time of year it is. That's the ultimate goal, is that skill transfers, and I'm simply proficient because I can do it no matter what. Hope that makes sense. Yeah.
I've taught a long time, and grading has always been something that people have talked about and changed and talked about changing. I remember in high school, one time was going to use laude, cum laude, present grades. So I mean, it's like a cycle. Things are tried, and it goes back, and things are tried. So this looks good. So we'll see.
Yeah.
You know, to be honest.
Any other questions?
Any other board members' questions? Again, we can recircle back on this, because this is a major shift. Jill's put a lot of work obviously into this, along with these staff and.
Yeah, I wouldn't say
Committee.
I would say all, as a school district and as a team, our staff have done a great job really analyzing the standards and ensuring they have a strong understanding of the curriculum.
It seems like it was a lot for you.
Right, that's the ultimate goal, is that it really is ensuring that students feel supported and that we are able to really grow students in the learning progression, and that they have a stronger understanding of where they're at in their learning. No, I got this.
The third item on the information discussion agenda is a special education project win. So Kevin, I understand Project Win is an acronym for WIN is what I.
Okay, mine will be much shorter than Jill because I don't have as much detail and I don't have anything to present. So yes, Project Win is what I need. And you all received just a brief handout. This is just kind of an annual recap of where the program's at now, what's going down. And as always, I want to thank the administration and the board for the continued support for this program since it's been established, because it is a program that supports the students in our district that traditionally cannot or have not been able to be, for one reason or another, integrated in the building of with their classmates. But over the years, since it's been in existence, we've had a very varied group of students come through, and I can share with you tonight some of the success and the continued progress that's going on. But the program obviously was in the 3rd floor of Karcher that no longer exists. So thanks to your support, it has been relocated to the lower level of the 209 building. The large classroom that is there, the activity lunchroom setting that's there, along with the sensory room, 2 comm rooms, and the office space is very inviting, very enriched. Once they're just starting to take their own ownership of the space. So as the students that are there are claiming it, I would hope to get some pictures shared with you so that as they take that ownership and kind of make it their own, it's really becoming a nice learning environment for all of the students that are there. As far as the WIN students right now, we have one fourth grader, one sixth grader, who is currently being integrated for a couple classes over at Karcher, 2 eighth graders. One of those are also being integrated to Karcher, so the location of the 209 building is doing well to foster that relocation of those students back with their classmates and peers when they are able to, for the classes that they're able to. So right now, staff are kind of taking a hike around the construction and through things. Once that site is finished, that will definitely make an easier access to the other buildings. But that's, it's a work in progress. And then we also have 1 ninth grader there. The program still runs from 9 a.m. to 2:45 daily. And the goals for those students that are there are to, get the content, the core classes that they need, but eventually to increase over time their participation back with their typical peers in their homeschooled. And that integration is constantly talked about between the staff and the parents and the students themselves. So we never want them to say they've closed the door on going back to, the high school or going back to wherever they may have been performing before that. Also, simultaneously this year to the WIN students being in that program and that building, we now have what was room 1 at Karcher, which was another type of alternative program for students that were either still credit deficient as a senior or needed a few things, credit recovery kind of episodes, or that for one reason or another, they weren't quite ready for, they didn't meet the criteria or didn't need the intensity of WIN, but they also needed something more than what's in the building, and they weren't quite Fox River Consortium students, they just kind of had that gray area in the middle. Right now we have those former room 1 students from Karcher utilizing the activity room at WIN, and their classroom, they meet from 7:30 to 10:30 daily. And we have 2 10th graders there right now, 1 11th grader, and 3 12th graders. And these students, some of them also return to Burlington High School here to get more classes throughout their afternoon. Some of them are on more of a remote or a virtual component, and some are doing, they're doing direct instruction from the teacher, they're doing credit recovery. The 2 seniors are very close to being done and will be hopefully receiving their diplomas within the course of this year, possibly by the semester. And there are two teachers and 1 assistant that are supporting all of the students that are over there. And then one of those teachers also goes over now to the Fox River Consortium at the old district office and works with the students with IEPs in that setting as well, 2 afternoons a week when her other students have left the building. Just to kind of give you a recap, I didn't put this in your original document because I kind of thought about it last night actually, about former students that were part of the original WIN classes that were there. One of our original students from the first years of WIN successfully completed his at the age of 21 and went to the Pack House for his final year of programming and graduated last year in May with a great celebration of family and staff that supported him all the way from 3 to 21. So that was nice to see that he made it to that point and did very well leaving us. 4 of our former WIN students are currently successful here at Burlington High School, integrated with their age mates in this environment. And then one of our other students, just for informational only, has been parentally and county placed outside of our area, but we still maintain contact for quarterly meetings with her facility, but that's a residential placement that the parents have chosen to take on at this point. So, but otherwise, the program is, I feel, knock on wood, being very successful in its new location, and the building and the room and the space that you guys afforded to put there in the basement of the lower level of the 209 building is working very, very well. Questions for me? It's short and sweet.
I have a question. Yeah, with the construction going on at 209, has it been a disruption over this fall, or has it been pretty seamless?
It really has.
Level,
right, we're in the lower level. The lower level is completely done in that respect. There's been maybe occasionally, the students will say, oh, it's raining outside. No, they're just washing the brick on the outside. It's one of those kinds of things. The noise hasn't seemed to impede them. The locks aren't all working with the sensors and things like that. So sometimes there's, getting access to the building. Some of the itinerant staff that come and go from the building are kind of knocking on the doors or making phone calls to staff to say, come let us in, because, we still can't do that. until the system is all up and running. But that's the only interruption that we've seen of any sort. Very, very minor. I think they like the activity around the building.
Board members, any other questions?
Okay.
Kathy, thank you.
Thank you.
Our last item for discussion is health policy 5310, and Joe Fraser's here for give us a review and explanation of this health policy.
Okay, hi everybody. And yes, as a school board, we love you, thank you for all that you do for our students, I do appreciate that. So I was asked to come and speak and just kind of review again the board policy 5310 of health services. So this policy was adopted November of 2020 and replaces our former board policy, which was number 333, called Parent Rights in District Programs / Activities. That policy 333 was adopted in November of 07 and reviewed again in 08, which was exactly the same language. So this policy has been around for a while. I want to point out part of that also talks about staff trainings and making sure that staff are trained so that they can observe students for conditions that indicate signs of physical health conditions that may be pertinent to their ability to fully access the district's programming. And again, every year, our health aides undergo training in seizures, diabetics, all kinds of health issues, asthmatics. We do bloodborne pathogens, we do CPR, AED, first aid, diastat, glucagon, all kinds of trainings to help our students with health issues here at school. So that part is something that we definitely do. I know you received the packet that did have some information from the attorney for Neola, and I just wanted to point out, a few of these things. Point 4, this policy does not authorize any school district examinations at all. It merely requires notification to parents if any examinations are to be planned. So it doesn't allow anything. And it prohibits the implementation of any exams without notice. So this policy, much like the federal statute, prohibits the type of examinations described without parental notification. So this is intended to protect parental rights concerning their children while they're at school. This policy language is consistent with and mandated by the federal law. And again, originally it came apart, from 02 was the original statutory language, January of 02, and then it was revised in 19. So this policy and its requirements predates COVID, has nothing to do with anything related to COVID. This was done pre-COVID. It started in 02. So I just wanted to address some of those questions and make sure again, remind you of the packet and the information that you have. Some of the things that programming that we do in school health services is only with parent consent. We, have our Seal Smile program. Parents have to opt into that program. So it's only done once parents sign a permission slip for that. There was some talk about the high school doing blood drives, whether that would fit in this policy, something like that. Again, needing parent consent. There are certain other, sometimes special education students who need cares, where we are, toileting and diapering and caring for those students. And those parents are well aware of what we're doing, and we have a plan, and usually orders from physicians, to go forward and care for those students. So that's really the gist of this plan, of this policy and the reasoning for it, and that it is, federally mandated that we have it in place. Any feedback from me? Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was a little dark. It was a little dark to read my notes.
Actually, I can see my notes. Board members, any questions or comments for Jill?
Well, that was a good explanation.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll specifically say to follow up on Kevin's comment, just so members of the public know too, we've had a number of inquiries about this specific policy. And frankly, when I read it too, I was a little confused. So I think, but I understand too, that's not a reflection on Jill or Neola. We're following federal law here. So we're just trying to make sure we're compliant with what the federal law is. If you want to blame anything, I think it's our federal legislature.
Right, and the way they word
What a
things, yes.
confusing law. Right?
Yes.
Board members, any other questions?
Good explanation.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thanks, Jill. All right, we're going to move on to item 11 in our agenda tonight. Items for action. There's 9 of these, but I think they're going to move along pretty quickly. This is 9 seems like a lot, but some of these we can, I think, get through pretty quickly. But we'll see. I shouldn't say that. The first one is Special Education Seclusion Restraint Report. And we do this every year. So Kathy Merlo, our Director of Special Education, would you present again on this?
Again, you received this report, I believe, in your packet. And the major difference that I really wanted to point out or notify you of regarding the difference in the years. I put the comparison of the last 2 years in because last year the total number of seclusions was 15, total number of physical restraints was 13, and it involves 6 different students throughout the district. With the year prior to that, we looked at 75 seclusions, 66 restraints, and 9 different students involved. I really feel in talking with staff and talking with area districts that the policy of how we were performing our whole instructional system last year with COVID, everyone was social distanced, everyone was spaced out, we were in smaller groups, we had many more staff supervising smaller groups of students. I think that's what contributes to the drastic difference. I would love to say that we're going to maintain that, going forward, and that's how it's going to be from here on out, that we're going to have smaller numbers, but I can tell you, unfortunately, I think we've already surpassed this number as far as we are in the school year, just because we're back to, and kids are back in social groups and larger groups and things like that. But as we follow the same procedure that was put into place as of March of 2020, and that's how our staff have continued even reporting this last year's numbers. I mean, they followed the same policy and the same things that are written by the state of Wisconsin and put into law as far as how we report, and the reporting documents have not changed. They are continued there, so parents still get that information, and staff communicate and reaffirm every time there is any kind of incident that involves a seclusion or a restraint of a student. Any questions?
Kathy, you can stay there because you're on the next agenda.
Sure.
Before we move on, board members, I entertain a motion to approve this report.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right. Report's approved. Please, move on to the next item.
And the next one is that regarding the DPI, special education policies and procedures, and as they are written, we propose that we support them and follow them on an annual basis, and we continue to do that.
I move we adopt the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction standards for special education.
Second.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right, motion's approved. Thanks, Kathy. I think that's all we have.
Thank you.
I think we're moving on to Ruth Shenning, and we're going to talk about, or she's going to present on the resolution authorizing temporary borrowing.
This is really exciting. No, seriously, so every year we have to do some short-term cash flow burn because there are periods of the year, because of the timing of our funding, where we need additional cash to be able to pay our bills. So for example, our state aid we get quarterly, September, December, March, and June. And then the tax money we don't get until, like the levy for this school year, first payment isn't due until January 20th, February, and then the following August. So typically November through, until we get those tax payments in January, we have to short-term borrow every year to be able to operate. This year, we are borrowing $2 million, which is less than half of what we borrowed this past year. So a couple reasons. Last year was just a really uncertain year. So we, in hindsight, maybe borrowed a little more than we needed to, but also because we've been able to build our fund balance up, that is allowing us to borrow less. Now, I want to give a caution. Fund balance is not cash, so don't equate those two. Okay, cash is a part of what contributes to our fund balance level, but they are not one and the same. If you remember from the annual meeting, fund balance is the difference between our assets and our liabilities, or the accumulation of revenue and expenses from year to year. So cash is a part of fund balance, but they are not one and the same. So again, it's contributing toward us, to us to be able to levy less. Borrow less. We did use Quarles and Brady to help us with this process like we do every year. There was a summary of the bids in the board docs, so we received 6 bids. Typically, we've always gone with the low bid. So this year, the low bid was from R.W. Baird with an effective interest rate of 0.336385%. Like, that is the lowest I've ever encountered. The highest was 2%. So net interest cost is $6,200. So I would ask the board to approve that final resolution, which we were able to get in board docs now, to approve that borrowing, unless you have any additional questions, and then we would need a roll call vote, please.
Does this one be precise language in the phrasing of the motion?
Yeah, the title of it was, yes, please.
I move we go ahead with the resolution authorizing temporary borrowing in amounts not to exceed $2 million pursuant to section 67.128A1 of Wisconsin statutes.
Second.
All right, a motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, I guess, I understand we're going to do a roll call vote. So Toby, could you do a roll call, please?
Peter,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Marlo,
Yes.
Sandra,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Roseanne,
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ruth, I think you're, no, maybe not. Are you? Okay. I should have known. Parent transportation contracts.
Yes, thank you. So this is for the families that attend parochial schools. By statute, we have to provide transportation to our parochial school families that, as long as if the parochial school is located within 5 miles of our school district boundaries. So the ones that are in town, we transport them on the same yellow school buses that we do the students that attend our BASD schools. There is one school, Mount Zion over by Lake Geneva, where it does not make sense to do that. So another option is for us to enter into parent transportation contracts to pay the families to transport themselves because it's much less expensive. So this is just a formality approving those contracts. There's two options for the amount spelled out in the statute, that it's the greater of. One is $5 times the number of miles the family lives from the school, which is always a really low number, or it's based on the per pupil cost from the previous year, which is the case here. So we have 24 students in 15 families. The per pupil or per student amount is $737.45. So the grand total would be $17,271.40 for the year. Asking you to approve those contracts, please.
I move we approve the parochial school parent transportation contracts.
Second.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Is this number this year greater than it was over last year?
It is because the previous year we had a fewer number of students running during COVID. So that did bring that per pupil amount up.
Okay. I want to emphasize, I think you said this before, but this is a state statute.
It is.
We have no discretion on this one. So.
I mean, we could send a regular bus route, but it's obviously going to be a lot more money than this.
Yeah, we have a choice between A and B.
Yes.
We're choosing. Any other discussion, board members? All right, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Right.
Thank you.
Ruth, yeah, thank you. Food service van from buildings and grounds, and I'm guessing Dan Bocock's here.
Well, thank you folks for having me tonight. I first wanted to give a brief background on the food service vans. BASD routinely replaces its vans every 5 years for the food service. The food service vans are bought through Fund 50, which is not through the general fund. That's why it would not show up on our capital improvements plan. So then generally after the food service van is bought, the food service van that is in place is then not recycled, but cycled through our district maintenance vans. And that's why in board docs, you saw the van that ultimately would be being replaced in the district, which is a 2001 Ford Econoline with roughly 215,000 miles and probably has more holes in it than a block of Swiss cheese. We've been having lots of issues with it this past year with breakdowns, and currently our district electrician, Jess Warren, is the one that drives it around the district. With our routine replacement, I went out to bid, which was provided to you on board docs with the RFP. As you all know, the chip shortages that we've been going through, everything else in the chain of distributions throughout everywhere in the global industries. It's been difficult to get anybody to bid. I've reached out to several different folks to see if they even had the opportunity to bid or if they had a vehicle on their lot that they could give us a proposal for. Luckily, I was able to get Chris Miller, who actually had one coming in, at Miller Motors, to give us a bid and give us a price with a discount for government purchases. I did reach out to Lynch, and they were not able to bid at this moment. They weren't able to give any pricings for 2022, and they told me that we probably wouldn't see the van until 2023, regardless if we placed it today. I also then did some research to see if there was used vans out there. I did find some used vans that were 2019s with 20,000 miles on them that were more expensive than what was bid out to us brand new. So with after going out to RFP and with the routine replacement that the district goes through, it would be my recommendation to the board that we approve the bid from Miller Motors for the new 2021 Ford Transit for the sum of $32,697.50. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
So Going forward, can we put something in these sorts of RFPs that they can provide an equivalent alternate? Like, we said alternate to 2022 form, but we only have one person that came back and said, "I got 2021. Did no one else have a 2021?
No.
Or were they trying to follow the 2022 guideline?
Nobody had a 2021, because that's what I asked them, is if they had anything on the lot. And then from my understanding is that the Ford Transit production line has been shut down for the last 7 months.
They're impossible. So I understand that part, but I just want to make sure that we're.
Yeah, and I talked to each individual, and I talked to Martin in Union Grove, that's who because I couldn't get anybody, so then I just started calling people to see if other folks had either something on their lot that they could provide us a bid for, or if they could provide us one that we could have built, so.
I move that we approve the bill over bid for resource plan.
Second.
All right, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion, board?
Yeah, I have a question about, since we rotate the van every 5 years, is this part of the service contract with Airmark? Is that built into the contract?
We have to provide the vehicle, so it's not, we only pay them for the meals themselves. We are responsible for providing the vehicle. So the vehicle's not part of it.
And vehicles for distribution to the schools, right?
Correct, distributing the food to the other buildings.
So the food comes into the high school and then it's distributed out by youth.
Yes, they use it to distribute out meals, it's for like Project Win, for Fox River Consortium, that's at 100 North King Street. They get their large bulk supplies in at the high school. There is small refrigerations at the other schools, but their large majority of their bulk materials come into the high school, and then they deliver it out.
And if I recall correctly,
They go to all buildings.
Yeah.
the 150 is a fund that operates in a surplus, and we have to use that money specifically for the food service.
Exactly.
We can't use it for any other method.
Board members, any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. All right, motion passes. Thanks, Dan, for that.
Yes, thank you.
We have remaining 4 items for action are board operations, relating to mostly policy, but I guess we have the wrong policy. The first one is our first reading of policy 0167.3, public comment at board meetings. This is following our discussion at our last special board meeting on September 27th. I guess I'll throw it out if there's any discussion on this. I think we did go through it pretty thoroughly at our special board meeting. I guess I'd entertain if there isn't, I'd entertain a motion on this policy.
Make a motion to adopt this policy 0167.
Second.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
So I was reading through it, I think we still have some conflicts in here. Because we changed up top, where we say stand and state name, to know the address. But if you scroll further down to section. So further down here, that they need to state D. Section D on page 2. For all purposes,
You're right.
participant must be recognized by the presiding officer will request to preface their comments.
Good catch.
So we just get that straightened out, I appreciate it.
Well, I think that the intent was that we weren't going to ask members of the public to give their address when they speak. They can be, we're asking them to put it, if you look at the top of the agenda, it says when they fill out the sheet, they'll put their address there, but that's not distributed to the public, so.
Well, it's public document, so.
Well, okay.
But yes, we won't be.
Right. They wouldn't have to publicly state their address, which I think is a desirable thing. So I think we have to amend the motion if we're going to make that change to delete address from section D. So I entertain an amendment.
I would amend the motion
Second.
Okay, an amendment to the motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on that amendment? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of the amendment, go on.
Aye.
Opposed to the amendment? Nay. Okay, so the amendment is passed. Any further discussion on the motion itself as amended? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, thank you. So the motion's, just so it's clear, then we got that, we're gonna make that other change in D, and that's the first reading of that public comment. Our policies require 2 readings, so we're gonna vote again in a future meeting on the second reading before it becomes an official change to our policy. Just make sure I got this covered here. Oh, we need to do the public comment form also, which is was that part of the policy?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't think we need to take action on that, but I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. We have a new public comment form that's attached, and the members of the public can view it too. It just,
Technically, they didn't need to move first reading, during the vote, second reading. You just have to read it for the first reading.
but thank you. Yeah.
One thing I would potentially like to see, but this might be a technical hurdle, I'd like to see this electronic form. So rather than having everyone trying to scratch something out that we may not be able to read, it can be typed up as people enter, and it'll be legible at that point.
I mean, like, so the public could type it up beforehand, or you'd like to
They
see?
could do it beforehand, but I'm saying we'll just have someone at the entrance, come over here for public comment, we'll put the information in, and come to the board.
They can print it, and make it.
Absolutely, however, just so as long as it's like, we have an electronic version.
Board operations, the board comments email. And we had talked about at our special meeting that we were no longer going to take board comments using board comments at basd.k12.wi.us. I guess I can entertain a motion to discontinue use of that board comment.
I move that we go back to using individual board email addresses for communication purposes. And discontinue the board comments email address to reduce confusion.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to discontinue using board comments email and use individual board members' emails for correspondence with the board through by email. I didn't say that as eloquently as Barry did, but you guys got the gist.
I didn't
Yeah, any discussion, board members? Hearing none, I ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Next item for action is board listening sessions. And we had talked about again at our special meeting that we were going to use a process change where we were going to hold a special meeting the first Thursday of the month. So that'd be 4 days before our regular monthly board meeting. And during that time, we'll hold a public comment section or listening section for members of the public. And one key criteria is that we would work to make sure that the agenda is out so members of the public would be aware of what's going to be discussed at the following Monday's meeting. Although I'll disclaim that it's possible there could be other agenda items that could pop up between the Thursday and Monday. But we'll do our best to make sure that members of the public are apprised of the agenda. I'd entertain a motion to make that change. And I guess it's really more of a standing practice for our board.
I move we go forward with the board listening sessions on the first Thursday of the month, preceding regular monthly school board meeting.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? I'll make a comment. I just want to emphasize that this is something we're going to try, and we're trying to improve our ability to solicit comments from the public and give opportunity for board members to consider that before we hear items and vote on it. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, we're working on it, so we may consider something in the future if it doesn't work well.
So then if we do listening sessions we will not have board comments during the regular public meeting, correct?
Yeah, thanks Susan for that clarification. So like tonight, we had public comments as, part of our agenda. That would be the Thursday before. But again, let me emphasize this too. We're going to work to have that agenda out so folks will know what's going to be discussed Monday. And it's possible we may have administrative presentations, board members, so people can know what's going to be discussed or what's part of this. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Excellent. All right, that passed. The final item for action. There's a lot here, but this is mostly technical revisions to our policies that are recommended by Neola. And being policy changes, this is our first reading. And so very wisely pointed out that we're not taking a motion, but we should do the reading on this, I think, is our first step. I'm not sure if we're going to read all of these. Do we need to read?
No, I just announced them.
Okay.
I guess one thing I'd like to clarify, technical updates are almost always, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, legal corrections that are made, and they're not changes to policy per se unless required by law. So we're not tweaking anything in here except as required.
Yeah, no, thanks for that clarification too. Other board members have questions or comments on this first reading? All right. Is the first reading considered done? I guess that's all right. So that will come up again in the next another meeting. All right, that concludes the items for action. Future meeting dates. Steve, would I take us through what's coming up? Well, I guess I can do it. We had Steve already mentioned before, October 25, a special school board meeting, and I forgot the topic. Approval of tax levy. That came up earlier tonight. And then our November 8th would be our next monthly board meeting. But I assume before that we're having a Thursday board meeting because we just changed our policies.
We didn't have that.
Sure.
Policy, right? Policy.
Very well done. Keeping me on the straight and narrow, very appreciate it. So the Thursday before the 8th, which would be the 4th, I guess, something like that, 3rd or 4th November. November 4 would be the next public comments section, or what we'll call our first inaugural board listening public comment session. Okay, and just so you know, Steve just informed me it won't be here in the auditorium, but we'll be informed. There's an NHS induction ceremony that night here, so we're going to find another location for the public comment section, but we'll give notice as much ahead as possible. That being said, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We typically, the monthly meeting will be at 7 o'clock like normal, and we haven't set the time for the board listening session, but I would assume it'll be 7 o'clock. But please check the notices before. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. All right, we're adjourned. Thanks everyone for coming tonight.